Dominyck Bullard. Appreciate you joining me, man. Just looking forward. I know we connected a few weeks ago, but looking forward to kind of sharing the story here and what you guys are building. It's awesome and kind of on the forefront of a lot of change in like college athletics and just athletics in general. So yeah, man, this will be great. Thanks for coming on.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me, Joe. Appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. So how about I start here and a quick 30-second elevator pitch of what you guys do. What or what is that? If you could just share that, because there's like you guys do a lot, man. So I'd be
Yeah.
curious just to hear, and then we'll kind of backtrack a little bit, but just curious how you kind of share that with people.
Oh man, you're kind of asking the worst guy here. You do too much as a founder, man. So it's like it can get cloudy. But really, I think to best summarize it, we help Athletiverse anyways. Really helps turn fan attention into growth and revenue in sports. We started off primarily in the NIL space around 3 years ago, really helping brands early on, best target athletes, figure out how to engage with them and from more of a digital marketing perspective. So a lot of what we were doing early on was a lot of post-production, editing. We've always been in the content editing space. We've always been really, I think, digital creators for folks before anything else, technology wise. But now, whether it's a collegiate, client that we're working with, or even a professional team or league, really helping those folks grow the attention that they currently have, and then monetizing it. That is the most simple way I can put it. I think for everyone here.
Cool, man. Awesome. Well, yeah, looking forward to kind of hear more about that. But what about the story of how you got into this? So San Diego, I know you're a ball player, and then unfortunately had some injuries along the way. But would love to just hear kind of the background of how this all got started.
Yeah, man. Yeah, so I grew up out in Las Vegas. My grandfather was a coach at UNLV for a long time. Probably, I think he's, if not the most winningest, second winningest coach in like Nevada state history for baseball. So I kind of just grew up on the diamond, man. Really, like after school, I was getting dragged to a field somewhere or playing myself. Once I was able to. So been playing baseball forever. Ended up going to Bishop Gorman High School, playing baseball there. One of the more competitive, schools in the country for it, which was, such a blessing at the time. And then played all 4 years there. And then COVID hit. Spent a year at the College of Southern Nevada. For those that are like, where in the heck is that? What is that? I just tell folks, that's where Bryce Harper, spent a year before going on to just
Go,
tear
baby.
up Major League Baseball. Yeah, my Phillies fan here. So yeah, went to junior college out there. CSN at the time, we were actually the number one ranked junior college in the country for baseball. So it was just a really good time to be there. I think 6 or 7 draft picks the year I played there. And, junior college, especially going to Gorman my whole life, I'm a private school kid. I think the culture was a little bit of a shock for me, and just in terms of, maybe the balance between education and playing. And so I kind of wanted to get out of there as quickly as I could. And my sister went to the University of San Diego. Her husband, Matt, played down here. And so I always wanted to come play baseball down here, especially for the coach at the time, Rich Hill. Rich was probably in his 20th something year when I was considering coming down here. And so my junior college season ended. And right when it ended, I got diagnosed with a bone tumor in my right arm. So I was going to go get surgery anyways, and need to rehab. But I had my coach basically reach out to Rich and say, hey, we got this kid. Can he come down and walk on for you? And Rich was like, yeah, absolutely. Send him down. We'll give him a shot, sort of thing. And so I only applied to USD to transfer. Luckily, I got into the school, and that was the rest is kind of history. I ended up getting down to San Diego in the fall. Unfortunately, a week before I got to school, Rich got let go of for, honestly, I don't even really know if I know the full reason why, but, just ended up moving on, went to coach at Hawaii. And the new coach that had just come in at the time, the assistant coach, I think it was Brock Ungrich. I think we weren't really aligned expectation wise in regards to, being a part of his roster, to be honest with you. And so, never got the chance to play at USD. And that's really where the horizon opened up for me, into what I'm doing today.
Gotcha. Nice. Yeah, but when the coaching regime changes, it's kind of tough. You know, they want their own guys in there. It it shakes things up a little bit. So
That's
I
man.
hear you, man. But that so that kind of paved the way for you to explore. So where did the like did you always have a kind of an entrepreneurial itch, or kind of where did that originate from?
Yeah, man. I think certainly for my family. I think my mom's family owned a hotel and casino over in Las Vegas back in like I think it was the early 1940s through the 70s at least, and so kind of got it from her blood a little bit. And then my dad was an entrepreneur. Ended up the only company that he started, he ended up selling to IGT, which is a computer tech company out in Vegas. Did a lot of work just in the call it the casino software industry for almost 30 years, and so I kind of saw him really enjoy probably the moments that he enjoyed most. I think in his life certainly that I saw were when he was building stuff and learning and doing his own thing. So I kind of always wanted to do that. I also grew up in like, the golden age of like the iPhone and listening to like, Johnny Ives and Steve Jobs drop some of the latest technology that's really changed kind of the face of the earth at this point. And so I never thought I'd be a big tech guy like those guys, but always just fascinated, man. Always fascinated, and to my parents' credit, always gave me the support and really the belief that I could go build something like that. Right? I think the expectation more so was set when I was younger that it was better to build something to stand out than kind of just follow into maybe a more, I don't say guaranteed path, but certain path for sure. So that's kind of where everything began, and I can continue to go on. I mean, I went to Bishop Gorman again and for high school, and a similar guy who went to Gorman and then actually ended up going to USD. Where the Fertitta brothers, what they did with the UFC. So there was just like always, there's just always guys where I was like, dang, like that's really cool. Like we should go do that. And I don't know, my personality is more along the lines of like, if you're going to wonder what I'm going to do in a situation, it's probably going to be the thing that'll be like the coolest story. So I think that just like aligned with, entrepreneurship really well.
Yeah, yeah, dude, I'd say so for sure. Yeah, you're kind of pursuing, and plus you're how old are you?
23.
23. All right, man. So you like right out of the gate, I feel like there's kind of a couple different paths you can go. Like one of them is, yeah, you go work that traditional route that you were just talking about, and then maybe at some point you kind of shift into something else, or you take the risk to do it while you're young and you don't really have, not that you don't have responsibilities, but you don't have a family, anything like that. So it's so that's cool, man. So then where did the so Athletiverse, just maybe just share a little bit about how that got started and how it kind of went from being this idea that you maybe had into something a little bit more tangible.
Yeah, yeah. I think well at the time I was obviously like a big sports fan, and something I just it was so funny. The way Athletiverse really got started was I had this website called the Varsity Chronicle that I ran during COVID, where I would reach out to athletes across the country. They didn't need to be. I was actually specifically looking for athletes that weren't very big. So I'd reach out to like athletes I could find on Instagram that maybe had a couple thousand followers or so. Reach out to them and say like, "Hey, can I interview you and write up your story and put it on this blog website?" And so I was doing that during COVID while I was still playing. And then after my career ended up wrapping up, I was like, well, I should kind of revisit that. And I quickly learned like there was no business model. Like I had no concept of a business model when I was doing that. I was like, oh, we're gonna put athlete stories out there. We'll find a way to make money somewhere somehow. That was not true. You need distribution. You need eyeballs to make something like that work. So kind of just thought of well, what's next for me? I have no idea. Let me think of something for me to do, and I've always been really creative. I actually, my favorite part about doing these stories with athletes was, creating the graphics and the web design that would go with the stories. And I was like, well, let's just get into editing, right? Why not? So I opened up an Instagram account called Athletiverse because I was like, wow, I can't believe that's available. Sounds like a world for athletes. Sounds really cool. So like I grabbed that and got the trademark for it, and just started posting like sports highlights. I was just taking all these clips from games that I was watching at the college level, professional level, and just kind of clipping them together and then posting them on Instagram. And then it suddenly started picking up a lot of traction, more specifically with like college athletes. I feel like a ton of college athletes were following us and what we were doing. And that's where the first inclination was like, okay, well, I have this audience, how do we serve it and maybe best take advantage of maybe monetizing it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So monetizing that audience then, because the big thing, like a big thing for you guys is newsletters, right? I mean, you're helping, was it athletes and then athletic departments or NIL collectives with newsletters. So you're almost garnering that attention, right? And then helping them distribute that. So can you just explain maybe how that works? Because even what you were just saying, like that's kind of what you started doing, just interviewing people, is kind of what I'm doing now. But there's nothing, there's no business or anything behind it. It's just kind
Yeah.
of this is what it is. But and I don't have a newsletter yet, just because time. I
Sure.
need a couple more hours in the day, man. But I just maybe just explain that for somebody, like, or maybe if there's an athlete out there or somebody like that that is curious about how that distribution with the newsletter works.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would
So
be
I think,
curious about that.
yeah, how we ended up, I guess, getting to that point, I'll kind of complete the loop. So I was trying to, figure out how to monetize the audience that we had. And I had a good, looking back, I guess your heart's always in the right place, but I kind of understand the mechanics of what I was doing. At that point, I was like, let's create a marketplace and connect all these athletes that are following us with brands. Like, and I, again, completely going to that ignorant of like what brands are looking for, what athletes need to fulfill on their part to make that happen from a content standpoint, right? There's holes everywhere in that model. But we tried it anyways. Got to the point where I think we had spent like $40,000 or $50,000 just trying to build the software, and then kind of just realized, wow, dang, this isn't going anywhere. So kind of abandoned ship there or pivoted. And one of the things we pivoted to was really just, I feel like through all the trials and tribulations of that time in my life, and I was like 19 at the time, right? So just a lot of it's just trying to figure stuff out. I just went back to the basics. It's like, okay, I have this editing skill. Like, let's go back to that. Like, what can I do with this? Ended up making a connection and relationship that has really changed my life, and certainly the businesses that we can talk about here in a second. But ultimately that guy was like, hey, let me set you up with some folks that need some editing, need some things done. And so that's how Athletiverse, as the data driven creative agency we are today, began. Right, started just doing freelance work. But how we got to the newsletters, and I'll tie it all together, was a lot of times we were creating content either on a one-off basis, or on like a retainer basis for different brands or athletes, in sports. And one of the biggest things that I was just noticing was kind of this like inability to really, I would say, monetize in a more sustainable, fashion. Because if you're a creator, if you're a brand, if you are a team, you have to constantly be keeping up with whatever algorithm that you're on platform wise, right? If you're on TikTok, Instagram, whatever, not to mention if those things get compromised, in a second, your audience is completely gone. So the newsletters came about kind of as like a second stage to Athletiverse in regards to like our offering to clients, because originally it was just that content offering, right? Like, hey, we'll manage your account, we'll edit stuff, we'll help grow your audience. Then it really became about like, okay, well, how do we go from like top of funnel, right, attention awareness, down to driving a little bit more value, capturing first party data, capturing data that brands are more specifically interested in, right? We get to work with Unrivaled Basketball now, right? So like when Sephora's thinking about how do we connect with, Unrivaled in a more meaningful way, Unrivaled's able to say, hey, we have 50,000, female fans in our newsletter that we can directly get you into the inboxes of, which is a whole lot more valuable and, a whole lot more, bulletproof than just putting out a Sephora post on Instagram, right? And so, yeah, I long-winded way of telling you how we got to the newsletter side of things, but I think really helpful to kind of understand.
No, definitely it is. So are you guys, where is it like athletes? So the one thing I saw, right, Kyle Kuzma, right? Do you
Hmm.
guys are working with him or have produced his newsletter or anything?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
are athletes doing that? Professional athletes, and like I'm
I
just wondering, does it is it just the athlete, or is it, say there's that, yeah, NIL collective or a high school that's trying to create more of that mass distribution? Obviously, like, email chains aren't anything new. Newsletters kind of are more of that more recent thing. But is that kind of how that works, and what you guys are doing for people?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Kyle's our only, athlete personality at this point that we've worked with and continue to work with. The reason for that, I think most athletes, for them to write a newsletter, that level of consistency and thought process. Not going to say that athletes don't have that, right? But they're so concentrated, they're so focused on being the physical best in their space and in their world and in competition. I think putting that effort into trying to write and put together this funnel strategy on how do I really capture my audience, right? Like, I just don't know if it's necessarily, if they're the best avatar for that necessarily at this point in time. So yeah, Kyle's the only athlete that we work with on the broader scope side of things, right? Most of the teams we've worked with, collectives, they're really looking at it from a standpoint of, one, it's a time saving thing. It's a headache. Most of the clients we were working on early on were pretty small, right? It was teams of 1 to 5 people that were like, hey, we have to have that dialogue with fans. We have to create that dialogue with donors and supporters. We just don't have the time or energy to put into this thing, right? So you guys do it, right? So that's how we earned a lot of early business. Nowadays, working with more, bigger legacy properties, it's become a matter of, our CPMs on, Instagram versus email are totally different, right? It's much more valuable to have somebody's email, especially with where we're going with AI and, developing fan profiles now in our ecosystem, especially. That first party data is a whole lot more valuable than likes and clicks on social media, right? So, for more of the properties and teams we've evolved to working with today, it's much more a matter of driving that first party data, segmenting it, understanding who our fans are, and how we best communicate with them. And I think broadly speaking, that's what everyone wants. That's what creators, athletes, that's what guys like yourself are just looking to do. You're looking to create kind of your own, owned community where you kind of better understand those folks and they feel like they have, a more one-on-one connection with you, right? Because you're getting an email from one person. It's not a post shared with 100,000 people that everyone can see, right? So, yeah, a lot of interesting caveats in there.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's more personal. So when you're saying first party data, what does that mean exactly? Just the email, just like directly to the consumer? Is that, so you're a
Pretty.
data analytics guy? I'm not. I got some stuff to learn, but
Yeah.
yeah. How do you think about that?
Yeah, you could think about first party data as, anything that's going to show up on, what I like to put, maybe your doctor's notice, right? So you got your phone number, your email. Um, I don't know if we would consider necessarily social security. I guess you can consider that first party data, right? Addresses of your house, right? Things that are just more tangible, and really have kind of, I would say, one to one input output, right? So like email is one thing. The problem with Instagram is it's not necessarily first party data because you don't actually own the data. It's a rented platform, right? So your audience is rented on Instagram. So my audience, Dominick's audience of 20,000 Instagram followers, is technically owned by Meta, right? I don't have the first party contacts and data of all of my followers, right? So that's really what first party data can kind of just be generalized as. I'll save the data analytics rhetoric, but I think that's an easy way to understand it.
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense. That makes sense, man. So how about for you? Like how was your age? So you're 23,
Mhm.
and you started going when you were, what you said, 19, or start doing this a little bit more, um, with a bow on it, so to speak. Like, how has that worked for you and maybe against you? When you're going into some of these conversations with, because you raised some money for the business too, right?
We
Um,
did. Yeah, we did
that
early
you
on
can,
for the software side of things.
yeah. So maybe like, yeah, how is that? Because your age with some of these college athletes, I think I heard you in another interview. You're saying, hey, like you can speak these kids' language, especially in this era that we're in, which would be totally different from, a guy that's been in private equity. He's 55, whatever it is, and has
Sure.
kind of been on that side of it for a while.
Sure.
So like, how does that worked for that audience, and then kind of dealing with some of those maybe private equity guys or whatever it is?
Yeah, I mean, it's trying for me, it's like I just try to remain, and I naturally am, so I kind of just lean into it, but trying to always put curiosity above everything else, right? I think the way that I was able to raise funds early on from folks as a teenager was built upon the fact that I could, I taught myself the lingo. I understood how convertible notes worked. I did what it took to understand, the social currency that those guys trade on, right? And that's really where I think the advantages come is like it's already come natural for me from a fan perspective, right? Whether we're dealing with college fans, fans in sports, like I'm a fan, right? So like I think I can really speak that language, right? And I think in terms of dealing with folks that are more like you said, they come from the investment banking side of things, which more and more these days I continue to find myself in more conversations with folks in that realm, and continue to just learn so much from them every day, from just a system standpoint, right? Because all these, business is not new. I think all these concepts that are hitting the market are feeding upon things that historically we've always known. But I think, yeah, the advantage has certainly come in understanding the mind of like the Gen Z, especially fan, what these younger generations of fans are looking for, how to capture attention, how to relay it. The challenge for me, and I try to work on it, really every day is like, how do you build the systems around it that scale, right? Because funny enough, like social media and people that come from like the social media generation, again, Gen Z and probably younger there, um, we just don't seem to have a natural inclination towards, more sustainable systems. Like we look at Instagram and it's like, we have the tools, we have the know with all to participate in that, to create content, to post it. But like, there's like there's a scalability problem with almost all of it, right? And I think folks that are maybe of that millennial generation and older, maybe private equity side of things, investors, like they understand, I think, the mechanics of just good business a little bit better. And so for me, it's been really putting an emphasis on understanding those mechanics better every day, while also just letting my curiosity kind of fuel how we can best serve people continuously. So not sure if that answers your question, but kind of the
Oh
kind of
man, that was that was a great answer. I thought, yeah, because you're kind of blending. It seems like you're doing a good job of blending both of those together. Because yeah, you understand that younger generation, the fan that's on Instagram. I mean, yeah, maybe speak to that a little bit. Like, is that fans and teenagers and everything? They're probably spending Lord knows how many. I know how much time I spend on my phone and scrolling through some of those. So like teenagers and kids in college and everything. I mean, it's the it's the it's the pros and cons of it, right? Because yeah, your attention is diverted and you're locked into these apps sometimes. But if you're a college athlete or whatever, you can find ways to make money off of probably these apps or being a creator, things that the older generation would cringe at. But, so like, yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts around that, like just maybe with the intention and kind of where that's headed a little bit.
yeah, I think there's just never been more distractions, which I think I can appreciate some of the older folks that I rely upon for wisdom and guidance because like my dad, for example, My dad's got a Twitter account that he checks periodically, but he's not really dialed in to the culture per se and what's going on there. But he has an exceptional ability to focus on something and get it done. And that's something that like I think continuously will try and test our generation for, not just the for the next decade, but the foreseeable future. Right? Is it there's so many options for people to go these days. You could quit your job and go become a creator suddenly. You can monetize a product, within a day. You can build an AI app within a day. I just did it last week, which is crazy. But there's so much attention
That is
going
crazy.
in different places, right? And just the speed at which you can grow your own reach and brand. Something that I tried to do a little bit more of this year was kind of sharing more of just like how I'm thinking about things and what I'm learning, just being in the seat of doing what I get to do on a daily basis. And I think I had like 1,000 Instagram followers at the start of March, and I'm at 20,000 now, right? So it's like the speed at which, if you understand the systems of things that, if you understand those systems, how fast you can scale, um, it's a phenomenal thing. It's the best thing in the world because I think it's never been easier, to have success. But it doesn't mean it's more simple. If anything, it's more complex than ever, right? There's so many different variables to these things, and so yeah, it's gonna be a challenge not just for my generation, but for everyone's. So yeah, that quick thought on
Yeah.
that, anyways. But yeah.
Yeah. No, dude, I agree with you. You were talking about AI a little bit. You created, what did you say, an AI app or an AI agent in a day? Um,
Yeah.
how does that, how does that so here you go. You're the 30-year-old is like figuring out some of this stuff here. But how does that supplement a little bit of what you're doing as well? Like that. And then maybe if there is a college athlete or the athlete or athletic department, how are they starting to intertwine some of this into their everyday operations?
Yeah, probably where it gets a little bit controversial in terms of my opinion on it. But I think sports is at the college level, anyways, is far behind where technology is today, and I think that gap's going to exponentially increase year over year until you know I don't want to say there's a breakthrough, but there has to be some sort of I honestly think it's probably just the passing of the baton to the next generation of leaders in that position. Um, when you think about AI, and we're a creative agency, right? We can call ourselves a data driven creative agency. We can put whatever structure around it we want there. But at the end of the day, we create content. We help people distribute it, and by the end of July, actually end of August of this year, I mean, over 50% of our business will be autonomous. It will be AI driven, right? Every one of our clients right now, we are working on developing AI models for and agents that execute specific tasks and content based upon their specific needs, right? If you think about what that even means and think about how currently college athletic departments operate, right, there's a huge gap in innovation there, massive. And it's exciting because there's a lot of opportunity to come in and help folks, but it's also going to ruffle a lot of feathers. I mean, there's so many I think jobs that I'm not going to say are going to get replaced, but certainly dispersed in different areas. People are going to need to learn skills that they've probably never thought they would need to learn, right? Like your marketing director, your head of development in 5 years is going to need to know, how to better tune in, your cold outreach AI agent rather than typing up a quarterly summary, right? So it's one of those very interesting things. I think there's so much opportunity around it, and we are personally in our business. I don't think AI is not, it shouldn't be looked at as like a buzzword, but rather it should probably be felt as like web, 2.0, right? I think this is, if we're going to discuss like the age of like the internet, we're probably in like 1997, 1998 right now. And you have probably until 2004, 2005 to really start understanding what the heck's going on. Right. So a whole lot of progress is going to be made really fast. And I think, we're trying to be at the forefront of that as best we can and simplify that down, for our customers.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. 50% of your business is going to be automated. I mean, if you can share, if you're able to, what parts of that are automated? I mean,
Yeah. So
yeah, I don't
most of
know. Like, yeah.
when you think about, I can't, I'll just clarify it now, creative is not something that can be, uh, you know, call it, let's call it reasonably curated today. There is no AI, whether you're using 11 Labs, ChatGPT, uh, whatever you'd like, to create video and graphics for. There's nothing that can do it yet because, uh, you know, the the actual logos, text distortion is still a very big thing that AI has to work through. And those models are getting better every single day because people are feeding them. But the thing that we are, I would say we've already done it internally is any fan, call it segmentation and call it cohort analysis. So understanding the sentiment of a fan. So like Unrivaled Basketball is a great one for us because we write their newsletter. Every single moment that somebody tweets Unrivaled, we're capturing data. We have an agent that's taking in that data and it's figuring out what the sentiment is, and then how are we talking to those fans in past newsletters, and then it can say, hey, we recommend you go this route in this next one, right? We're going to be able to do that for all of our newsletters, and by the end of the summer we're going to be able to do that for all of our content marketing clients. So people that we run TikToks for, Instagrams, YouTube channels, etc. Right? So that's pretty incredible because it takes away, half of my job every single day is I don't say R&D, but it's mostly the research part. The development part is like, I wish I could spend more time in development, but it's really research. It's like educating yourself on, where a specific client needs help, where things kind of falling apart. And AI really allows you to better diagnose the health of a system, more specifically the fans in that system, how to best address them. And then we can go even to the level of, here are the best brands that we can bring into this system to partner with it. And that's where it gets really powerful, is how AI is going to sit at the intersection of, culture and collaboration, which I think we'll get to pretty quickly here. But yeah, that's probably the most I can give right now with certainty. The rest would be
Okay.
a little bit of hyperbole.
Gotcha. It's crazy, man. It really is. What about with college athletics? I mean, so you played a little bit at San Diego. Like I played 8 years ago at this point. That's when I graduated from Seton Hall. So I just ran into a kid recently or this past weekend who he actually plays at NJIT. And I mentioned it, I think I brought up Open Doors to him, like Blake Lawrence, and he's like, "Yeah, I know Open Doors." And St. John's got brought up, so another Big East school. He was like, "Yeah, some of these kids are getting paid, baseball players, like 50 grand or something like that." I was like, "Dude, what?" I mean, that's insane. So just I guess the landscape of college athletics, that's one of the hottest topics right now. I feel like everybody has an opinion on it. Like, the old school people are like, this is not college sports anymore, et cetera, et cetera. They might have a point, but like, how is that gonna? Because you've probably seen a lot of that. How is that going to continue to evolve the next year or 2 years? Like from your perspective, with athletes getting paid and brands and whatnot. I'd just be curious to hear your opinion on that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. I think 3 or 4 years ago now, I had the chance to sit down with Blake, and we were just talking because I think he had found out what we were building in the space, and I think wanted to learn more, and so we were catching up. And man, what a far way things have come since that conversation in regards to the overall space. So that's pretty funny. But I think, man, the college market is a very it's just it's a bloodbath, to be honest with you, in my opinion, because you have the duality of athlete entitlement and the duality of legacy, not even legacy institutions, but legacy dollars, right? These institutions have so much money. I mean, I think I just read the other day, Harvard does 6.5, billion a year as a university. But Texas, right? Their athletic department generating hundreds of millions of dollars a year, right? So I think it's very tough because as a college athletic director now, you're almost a GM. Actually, you need a GM for each team almost to help really understand payroll and something that I don't think we've struggled with at the University of San Diego, but we're trying to like rapidly figure that out, right? Especially on the basketball side of things. But I think it's going to be extremely tough. I personally think, Joe, where this thing is going, the two definitive, I think we will get there. Answers are, the first is going to be, whether it's technologies like Out to Win and Jack Adler and what that crew is doing, better, I think, analyzing the true value of an athlete's reach. I think brands are already pulling back, it looks like, the spend on college athletes, which I'm personally like, I don't say I'm happy to see it, but I'm kind of happy to see it because not that these kids don't deserve to get paid anything. I think the revenue share side of things is great, but I think from a brand spend standpoint, you don't want people spending money and not seeing a return on investment. It's bad for everyone. It really is. The problem with, I think, most college athletes is they're more happy to accept money one time and blow a relationship with a brand because they didn't deliver, than having something that maybe is less or more sustaining, or learning the skills that it takes to sustain those relationships. Something that I can get into more later, that we're doing from an education standpoint. But I think you'll see brands pull back that spend and get a lot smarter, especially as markets go up and down, and folks got to be careful with budgets. But the second part of that is you'll see private equity come into sports just like everything else, and they'll come in at the college level, and they will bring nothing but what I consider to probably be unbiased innovation. Like they will clear the house of some of these departments that maybe for years have not innovated, have not done the things necessary to enhance and move forward, not just the brand but the university, because they're going to see it as an opportunity to make a lot of money, right? And so there's usually nothing that stands in the way of that. So I think you'll see both of those two things happen in kind of like a weird dance between one another. But college sports is messy. Yeah, we personally do not do. We're not doing business development, at the college level right now. We're just not. I think
Okay.
it's a decision that we made as a team heading into this year, organically, right? We still work with a lot of different folks in that space, and we're still speaking with potential customers in that space, but we're not actively trying to spend money to reach those people, just because I think there's a lot that needs to settle before then. And I think in the meantime, there's a lot of innovation on our part that we can handle with current clients, clients at the professional level, before we get trying to figure all that out.
Gotcha. Yeah, man. Once private equity, and I don't know the ins and outs of this, but once that comes into it, it's just going to be a disaster. I mean, at least if you're just like I said, I keep saying the traditional fan, like just a college sports fan. I mean, then it's everybody's going to be cutting, like you said, there will probably just be super leagues. I mean, I saw something, I forget exactly where it was, but like some of those SEC schools would have to consider like
University.
seceding from the SEC or something like that. Yeah, becoming their own entity, which is so crazy. Like a Seton Hall athletic department, they're already experiencing it because you got St. John's, what's his name from Body Armor, or like the $1 billion donor. I mean, how are you supposed to how are you supposed to recruit guys
No,
to come to come to
you,
your school when the guy
yeah,
across the river is making probably 3 million, $4 million? It's crazy.
you're
So
gonna end up with junior
um
varsity teams. I promise you that.
yeah, yeah, seriously. All right, man. So we'll kind of start to wind down here. This is interesting. Like, what's maybe for you just personally, like what's the biggest or a couple of the biggest things you've learned to this point, just in business or just building this business, the good and the bad? I mean, I'm sure there's been both, and just you learn a lot. But yeah, what are some of the biggest things so far for you?
Oh man, I think it's a never ending process because I think you there's so many things happening in business at once, right? There's innovation, there's competition, there's changes that so much of it you can't control. I think is really what you begin to learn. But I think for me, it's just I think I've really just enjoyed, fallen in love with. I don't need to romanticize it, but I think I've really just enjoyed working with our current customers and folks in the sports space, and just seeing the amount of opportunity that there is to just do things better. I think there's so many smart and talented folks, whether it be on the brand partnership side of things, marketing teams, sales teams, front office. Folks are more willing than ever to try new things, if it means obviously increasing their bottom lines, but just creating better experiences for everyone. And I think as a company, really mostly happy with how I think the people that work for us, the teams that we have and work with, even from a contractor standpoint, the partnerships that we have with people, all people that are just obsessed with, I think, the fan and customer experience, and like that just doesn't get anything. There's nothing better than that to me, because every day you're doing something that directly has an impact on somebody else's life, and I should say lives at scale being better, right? And that's just like you'll suffer any intolerable shortcomings to make that happen. So, from a personal standpoint, I really just enjoy that. Super super grateful because most of it is just, I think, so much divine intervention. So definitely thank God every day for the ability to do what we do. But yeah, I think that's been one of the biggest ones. And then I think from the second part of things, seeing the evolution, seeing now most of this past weekend, I think I had like 5 or 6 college graduations I had to go to. It felt ridiculous, but seeing folks in my generation go into the workforce now, and I don't have any other friends that are I would say working on their own things entrepreneurship wise, which is not a requirement that anyone have, right? Like everyone's path looks different. Um, but I think it's cool to be where I'm at, because you kind of just it reinforces this idea that you can just do things, and I think whether you're a college athletic director, whether you're the owner of a sports team, like there's never been a better time to innovate and try things, and you can just do them. We do the great thing about I call it like the Logan Paul effect on on our culture, is that you can mess up, you can do things that maybe don't go well with brands or fans, but if you keep producing content, if you keep showing up, I don't say people forget about that stuff, but sentiment changes so fast these days, and that is just like that's an incredible I think blessing for so many people, because it allows you to take a lot of shots on goal. And as an entrepreneur, I can tell you one thing: volume solves all issues of a business. And so I think that's a really cool aspect that folks have available to them today, and I certainly appreciate. So
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, you can. I mean, if you're in your seat or you're like an entrepreneur, I mean, it's just about like I mean, you just said it. Yeah, shots on goal. So the more you kind of put out there, the more chance you have to refine it, I guess. Yeah, just like you get to see where the audience is, or what sticks and what doesn't. um yeah, and you've done that with your Instagram and everything. Yeah, it's interesting, man, because I would just wonder, like, you just went to a bunch of college graduations. Are kids, quote unquote kids, are they curious about kind of the like just alternative ways, I guess, to make a living, maybe, for lack of a better way to say it? Or are they still going into, or want to do a traditional 9 to 5 job? Because the only reason I ask that is because you see so much on, like, if you spend any time on Twitter or you do any of that, it's just a lot of stuff that bashes that, which I think is probably not great. I mean, it's good and bad, but it kind of, yeah. So I don't know. Well, like, maybe there's kids who are like, all right, there's better ways to do this, or if you have that
Yeah.
entrepreneur spirit, maybe you can go after it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think for me, I don't sit on either side of that fence of like better to be an entrepreneur than to go work for somebody. I have people that work for me. I can't, for heaven's sake, say that like people should just not work for anyone. Like that's ridiculous. Um, I think
Oh
for
yeah.
me though, it's like, and it's probably echoed by a lot of the sentiment that you see on Twitter from folks of all generations and walks of life is I think people are just, there's a lot of fear out there. It's never been easier to share your thoughts and opinions. And I think it highlights a lot of the instability that, is everywhere these days. It's not just startups. Like startups feel it. Companies that have been around 100 years feel it, right? Like Sears is no longer a company. That's crazy. Like that's where my dad and I used to go to get all of our tools when we were younger, right? So there's just instability everywhere. And so I think it's interesting to see how that instability affects certain people because I do think people make, decisions based upon instability and fear factor to become an entrepreneur when they shouldn't. Some of them do the opposite. They decide to go the route of, um, you know, the alternative route because of that same thing, right? So interesting to see it all play out. I think more so on a macro level, and at the end of the day, I probably just I don't say pride myself, but most interested in just the economics of things. I think we're all kind of hype economists these days. Paying attention to how the trends kind of move, not just in the brand space, but in the business space certainly. It's interesting to see how that factors in. So, yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, dude, that is interesting. So, um, all right, Dominyck, appreciate you, man. That's what a couple of the other things that maybe at some point we'll link back up, but your newsletter is really good too, because you talked about, like, some of the, so for instance, TikTok versus Instagram, like how TikTok might be best for awareness, and then Instagram is kind of best for retention and conversion, like some of the content types you had out there. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like you're putting out a playbook a little bit, just of things, what you just talked about. Like, you've experimented a lot. So is that kind of the goal a little bit with that, is to put out a playbook for some people, say, hey, this can work if you follow it. So I thought that was interesting too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's something I take probably aggressively to heart is like you can't there's no point in trying to I don't say safeguard anything. I think the more value with social media, you're able to share so many good things and you're able to change so many people's lives so quickly. I think taking advantage of whether it's having a newsletter, getting into YouTube, talking about things on social media, doing what you're doing with your podcast, right? Like you have the ability to affect people in a way that is never ever before seen. And if you want to look at it from a business standpoint, right, um, right, because most of the stuff we do is pretty high ticket, so the majority of folks that listen, hear the things I'm talking about, they're never going to work with us, right? But it does kind of, I think, help nurture people along that are considering potentially hiring somebody like us, or trying to scale that new thing but don't necessarily know how to. So it is kind of a glorified, I think, lead magnet in a way. But certainly I love seeing, people sharing the insights that they have, that are certainly unique, right? Most of the data that's coming out of, my personal newsletter, the company's newsletter, is proprietary to us. So it's data that we're getting from clients. So like that's pretty special for us to be able to share that, I think, with people. And like you said, yeah, playbooks. Funny enough, the AI app that I ended up building last week, basically a playbook that allows you to research any product, and it'll give you basically the top trending products in that category of subject, the suppliers, and how to sell it. Like it does it like instantly.
Okay.
I think like the more I think more and more business these days, what AI allows you to do is just create so much more value up front, and social media gives you the distribution for that value, and that's a pretty sick recipe. So
Yeah, man. Yeah. I have to figure out how to make one of these AI agents or AI apps that
whatever
you're
you
talking
need,
about here. So
maybe we can
that'll be
squeeze.
my next experiment after I may put a little newsletter together. But all right, Dom, thanks, man. Dude, this is awesome. I know really talked a little bit about Athletiverse, but more so just your thoughts on the broad landscape of some of this. Super interesting, dude. I really appreciate it. If maybe just give a quick shout out to where people could find you, whether you personally or Athletiverse, if they're curious about it, would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you want to find more out about Athletiverse, it's just athletiverse.io is the website. You can follow me on pretty much every platform at Dominyck with a Y, so DOMINYCK B. I'll pretty much be making content on every platform at this point. LinkedIn is a little bit more business-esque, but sharing kind of my broader cultural insights, things that we're seeing here, almost on a daily basis. So really anywhere that you can find content, we'll be there. And yeah, really appreciate the not just the conversation, Joe, but your own personal curiosity, and you've done such an incredible job with other folks in the space diving into it. So thank you for all the work that you're doing, and yeah, hopefully we're lucky enough to have a follow-up conversation here in time.
I hope so, brother. I hope so. Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Well, Dominyck with a Y. Appreciate the time, man. This is great too. We'll definitely catch up again soon.
Thanks, buddy. Take it easy.